All right. One last pass at variable naming, and we're going to look at this code from the wild. I copied and pasted this uh, chunk of code in from a file that was involved with my most recent project. This is an example of where the author of this code did not spend enough time uh, naming variables correctly and decomposing things. Now, it is the case that if you are not a native English speaker and your mastery of English isn't high, it can be a lot harder to name things with finesse because you just don't know the language well enough. And I think that was the case with this developer. He was brilliant. The code he wrote worked very well, pretty much quickly. But then every person that came after him to take over struggled and struggled to understand it, but never had the time to fully rewrite it and just had a very, very difficult time with this code base. So let's take a look at this. So I don't know if it is still taught in software classes, the notion of, well, I'm sure the notion of refactoring is, but I don't know if the classic book on refactoring from way back in the ancient times is still pulled into play. But there was a classic book on refactoring, and they introduced a concept of a code smell. Now, a code smell, it's not a bad smell to the nose, but it was just the only word they can come up with to capture the notion that they're not really using their mind to parse things, but they can instantly sense from looking at the landscape that something is wrong. And so I'm getting a smell here that the class that this was in is doing way too much. It has way too many class variables instantiated in it. So this function all reset, a reset function is going to set everything to an initial value. But it has all these variables. And then there's a trial reset, which I learned was something that happens repeatedly during a particular run. So it would be a full reset and then some number of trial resets. And so the trial reset variables are probably, well, they could be a subset or a superset of what's up here. But in any case, there is too much going on here. So if I'm creating a class, if I'm getting more than this many class variables, I'm going to start thinking this class should be probably two different classes where each of the smaller classes has less responsibility to track things. But clearly, this is way too much. Okay, next thing is to pick apart the naming. First thing, we have a lot of Boolean values here, but the Booleanness of them is not captured in the name except for a couple of them, is instrumental case. And the rest of them, self.agency, self.non-agency. Some percentage of the population might interpret that as a Boolean notion, but some percentage would not. This one really bad. Object stored. Is it the object that was stored? Or is it a Boolean? So yeah, this is clearly needing to be more represented as a Boolean. And the way I always do that is with an is underscore in front. It just makes it unambiguous. If you look at a class and you have a general idea of what that class is supposed to do, then you should be able to look at the variables and have a much better sense of what the class is doing. They should have enough context in there that these are the ways that we're breaking down the information and storing it. Each of these pieces should at least come close to making sense enough that you don't need to do a research project to figure out what they mean. And this particular set of files for this one component, it was itself a research project for the students to understand it. When the developer left, and I looked at the code before he left to make sure that we were not going to lose a lot of information with him leaving, to quote Scooby-Doo, Ruh-roh, And so I had 3-hour-long Zoom sessions with him where I put comments on every couple of lines. There would be a comment that I had to put in to understand what was going on because this was a function that had 500 lines in it, and it was just incomprehensible to anybody but the very brilliant developer who whipped it out and got it working very quickly. So, see, is there anything else to say about this? I don't know. I think that's probably it. I'll probably remember something else after I hit stop, but I think we'll leave it there. All right. Well, I hope that was a little bit helpful.